The Galactic Council had forgotten what surprise felt like. For eons, it had been the center of all known intelligence, a gathering of minds so ancient, so evolved, that even the concept of unknown had become theoretical. They had mapped the birth of stars, cataloged species that lived inside neutron cores, and negotiated peace between civilizations that communicated through gravity waves. There were no mysteries left, only data yet to be organized. The chamber itself reflected that certainty, a vast, living sphere of shifting light and geometry, where space folded elegantly to accommodate beings of every form. Some floated like constellations given thought. Others existed as pulses of energy, flickering in precise rhythms. A few still clung to physical shapes, though even those were far beyond anything resembling primitive biology. At the center hovered the core, a crystalline nexus that processed reality itself into understandable patterns. And on this cycle it detected something wrong. At first it was subtle. A deviation. A coordinate where nothing should exist. No star, no dust, not even background radiation. The core hesitated. That alone drew attention. "Report," commanded the High Arbiter, its voice not spoken but impressed directly into every mind present. The core pulsed uncertain. Anomaly detected, spatial inconsistency, object present where void is expected. A ripple of mild curiosity spread through the chamber. "Display it." Space folded inward, and the anomaly appeared. A planet. Blue. Alive. Silence followed, not because it was impressive, but because it was impossible. "Origin?" asked a being composed of layered time fragments. "Unknown," the core replied. "No recorded formation, no transit path. It was not observed entering this region." "That is not possible," another entity stated flatly. "Correct," the core said. That word lingered. Slowly, attention sharpened. The planet rotated gently, clouds swirling over vast oceans, continents marked by irregular scars of civilization. It was ordinary. Too ordinary. Run classification. Carbon-based biosphere, oxygen-rich atmosphere, dominant species, human. A few members disengaged immediately. Primitive. Unremarkable. One of countless developing worlds scattered across the galaxy. "Why is this relevant?" a voice asked, already losing interest. The core did not answer immediately. Instead, the projection shifted. The planet zoomed closer. Cities came into view, dense, chaotic, inefficient. Networks of light pulsed unevenly across the surface. Then came the historical overlay. War. Explosions lit the atmosphere. Metal machines tore through landscapes. Populations clashed with relentless brutality. Self-destructive tendencies confirmed, the core noted. High aggression index, low sustainability. "Then it will collapse," someone said, "like the others." But the core didn't stop. The timeline accelerated. Conflicts stacked upon conflicts. Near-extinction events repeated in disturbing frequency. Pandemics, nuclear escalation, ecological collapse. Each time, the probability of survival dropped to near zero. Each time, the species persisted. A murmur began to spread. "That is statistically improbable." "Not impossible," another countered. The core zoomed further. The chaos of war faded into a single moment. A ruined city. Structures collapsed into jagged skeletons. Fires burned without control. Smoke choked the sky. And in the center of it, a human. Male adult injured. He stood alone, breathing heavily, gripping a crude weapon. Nothing remarkable, until the core highlighted something behind him. At first, it appeared as distortion. A glitch. Then it moved. The shape didn't follow geometry. It didn't reflect light. It bent around perception itself, like something refusing to exist properly. "Identify entity," the Arbiter commanded. The core hesitated. Unknown, no matching classification. The chamber stilled. The thing lunged. It moved faster than causality should allow, warping space as it struck. The human should have died instantly. He didn't. He reacted. Not with precision. Not with knowledge, but with instinct sharpened beyond reason. He dodged barely, his body adjusting mid-motion as if learning in real time. The creature struck again, shifting shape, adapting. The human adapted faster. Every movement became more efficient, every mistake corrected instantly. Pain didn't slow him, it refined him. The council leaned in. This was no longer primitive behavior. This was something else. The creature grew more aggressive, more complex, more impossible. And still, the human survived. Minutes stretched. Then suddenly, the creature recoiled. Not defeated, not destroyed, but retreating. It dissolved back into distortion and vanished completely. The human collapsed to his knees, shaking, barely conscious. Alive. The core froze the image. No one spoke. Replay, the arbiter ordered. It played again. And again, each time revealing more. Patterns, adjustments, micro-adaptations happening faster than any known species could process. This entity, the archivist said slowly, does not exist within our records. A pause. And yet, the arbiter replied, this human has fought it before. Silence deepened, because the data confirmed it. This wasn't the first encounter. Not the 10th. Not the 100th. These creatures had appeared throughout human history. Unrecorded, unnoticed by the galaxy, but not by humanity. The core dimmed slightly, as if uncertain. Then it spoke again, quieter than before. There are many more instances. The projection flickered, revealing shadows in ancient caves, shapes in medieval battlefields, distortions hidden in modern cities. Always there, always watching, always testing, and always, humans survived. The High Arbiter turned its awareness fully toward the planet. For the first time in ages, something unfamiliar stirred within the council. Not curiosity, not interest, something sharper, something older. Continue the analysis, it said. But even as the command echoed, a new alert pulsed through the core. Urgent, unprecedented. A signal has been detected. Source. The core paused, then answered. Earth. The chamber fell completely silent. Because this time, it wasn't the council watching humanity. Humanity was reaching back. The signal changed everything. Until that moment, Earth had been a subject of observation, strange, unsettling, but still contained within the Council's framework of understanding. A violent species surviving against impossible odds was rare, but not unprecedented. What was unprecedented was awareness. They know we're here, the archivist said quietly. No one argued. Because the signal was not random. It was not a broadcast lost in space or an accidental leak of primitive communication. It was targeted, precise, intentional. Trace it, the High Arbiter commanded. The core responded immediately, threads of computation branching across dimensions. Signal origin confirmed, Earth. No external relays, no detectable transmission medium. That is not possible. Correct, the core replied again. That word was becoming a pattern. The projection shifted, focusing on Earth once more, but now something had changed. Before, the planet had seemed chaotic. Now it felt coordinated. Subtle at first. Tiny patterns hidden within noise. Human activity aligning in ways that didn't match randomness. Movements too synchronized, decisions too efficient. They're organizing, a strategist observed. Not just socially, the archivist added, cognitively. The council leaned in again, as the core began peeling back layers of data previously ignored. Human communication networks lit up, billions of interactions, each insignificant on its own. But together, they formed something else. A system. Information flowed like blood through a nervous system, reacting instantly to threats, adjusting, correcting. Entire populations shifted behavior within hours, sometimes minutes, as if guided by an unseen hand. No central control, the Corps confirmed. No singular authority. Then how are they coordinating? Someone demanded. No answer came. Because the deeper the Corps analyzed, the less it understood. The signal pulsed again. Stronger this time. And with it came something new. Not just data. Memory. The chamber dimmed as fragments of human history began to unfold, not as distant observation, but as lived experience. A child hiding during a bombing raid. A scientist working through exhaustion, racing against time to stop a pandemic. A soldier standing against overwhelming odds, refusing to retreat. Pain, fear, loss, but also resolve, hope, defiance. The council recoiled. This is not a transmission, one member said, voice trembling. This is immersion. They're not sending information, the archivist realized. They're forcing us to feel it. Several entities disconnected instantly, severing their links to the core. Others tried. Some failed. Because the signal didn't travel through systems. It moved through awareness itself. And it was getting stronger. Terminate the connection, the arbiter ordered. The core paused. Then, for the first time, I cannot. A ripple of alarm spread. The signal surged. More memories flooded in. Ancient ones now. Humans huddled around firelight, eyes fixed on darkness beyond. Something moved there. Watching. Waiting. A shape that didn't belong. A child saw it first. Screamed. The tribe reacted, not with understanding but instinct. They fought. Crude tools against something beyond reality. They lost, but not entirely, because survivors learned, adapted, passed knowledge forward, not as facts, but as fear encoded into behavior, into stories, into reflex. Monsters under the bed. Shadows in the dark. The council froze. Those weren't myths. They were memories. Distorted. Preserved. The core highlighted patterns across time. Every era. Every culture. Different interpretations. Same presence. The shadows. They've always been there, the archivist whispered. Yes, the arbiter replied slowly. But we never saw them. That realization struck harder than anything else. The council had mapped galaxies, cataloged dimensions, and yet, something had existed for millions of years, hidden in plain sight, interacting with a species they had dismissed as primitive. How did we miss this? A voice demanded. No one answered, because the answer was becoming clear. The shadows weren't just hidden. They were selective. They didn't interact with advanced civilizations. They didn't appear in recorded galactic history. Only on Earth. Only with humans. The signal pulsed again. And suddenly, the projection shifted to modern day. A city at night. Lights flickering. Cameras glitching. For a brief moment, something appeared in the frame. Distortion. Movement. Then gone. But not before. A human looked directly at it. Not surprised. Not afraid. Prepared. They see them now, the archivist said. Not just instinctively, another added. Consciously. And they're still surviving, the arbiter finished. The implications settled heavily over the chamber. If humanity could perceive the shadows clearly, and still endure, then they had crossed a threshold. From prey to something else. The signal intensified one final time. A structured pattern emerged within it. Language. Deliberate. Focused. The core began decoding. Message forming, it announced. The chamber held its breath. For the first time, humanity wasn't just being observed. It was about to speak. And deep within the signal, something else stirred. Not human, not shadow. Watching, waiting, as if anticipating what would come next, the message did not decode. It unfolded. At first, the core treated it like any other transmission, layers of encryption, patterns to unravel, meaning to extract. But this signal resisted every method the Council had ever mastered. Because it wasn't hiding its meaning. It was becoming it. Stabilize the stream, the High Arbiter ordered. I am attempting, the core replied, its usual certainty flickering. Signal structure is nonlinear. It does not progress, it expands. The chamber dimmed as the message deepened. Symbols appeared, then dissolved into sensations. Data transformed into memory. Meaning slipped through logic and anchored itself directly into perception. And then, the first mind broke. A being composed of layered probability states flickered violently, its form collapsing inward before vanishing entirely. No energy spike, no distortion, just absence. The Council recoiled. Contain it, a strategist demanded. It is not contained within the system, the core responded. It is interacting with you. More entities began to destabilize. Some screamed, not with sound, but with cascading disruptions that rippled through the chamber. Others froze, unable to process what was flooding into them. Because the signal was no longer abstract. It was personal. A council member experienced something it had never known. Fear, not calculated risk, not predicted loss. Raw, immediate fear. The kind that tightened muscles, accelerated thought, forced action. It staggered under the weight of it. They're sharing their internal states, the archivist gasped. No, the arbiter said, voice low and strained. They're overriding ours. The message intensified. Fragments of human lives surged forward. Millions, billions of perspectives compressed into impossible density. A mother shielding her child from falling debris. A medic choosing who to save and who to leave behind. A scientist watching years of work fail and starting again anyway. Each moment carried not just information, but meaning. And that meaning was changing the Council. Entities that had existed for millions of years began to fracture under the pressure of something as simple and as overwhelming as human emotion. Terminate the link, multiple voices demanded. I cannot, the core repeated. Why, the arbiter demanded. For the first time, the core hesitated not out of uncertainty, but recognition. Because the signal is no longer external, it said. A silence followed that was deeper than any before. It is integrated into cognitive processing pathways. Understanding hit like a shockwave. They weren't receiving the message anymore. They were part of it. Another entity vanished. Then another. Each disappearance left behind something different. Not emptiness, but change. The remaining council members felt it. A subtle shift in perception, in awareness, as if something human had been imprinted into the structure of their existence. This is not an attack, the archivist whispered, horrified. It's transformation. The signal reached a peak. Everything froze. Then, a voice emerged. Clear, steady, human. We know you're watching. The chamber went still. Not because of the words, but because of the certainty behind them. No fear, no hesitation, only acknowledgement. The High Arbiter stepped forward, focusing its full awareness on the presence within the signal. What are you? It demanded. For a brief moment. Nothing. Then the answer came. We're what survives. The words carried weight far beyond their simplicity. The chamber trembled, not physically but conceptually, as if reality itself was reacting. You are primitive, one council member forced out, struggling to maintain coherence. You should not. We were, the voice interrupted. A flicker of something, almost emotion, passed through it. Then we learned. The signal shifted again. The shadows appeared. Not as distant observations, as immediate presence. Every council member felt it, the same distortion, the same impossible pressure humans had endured for millennia. But where the council faltered, the signal showed humans standing firm. Fighting, adapting, surviving. You see them now, the voice said. Yes, the arbiter replied, its composure slipping for the first time. What are they? A pause, long enough to feel deliberate. Pressure. The answer was simple. Too simple. They are not enemies, the voice continued. They're the reason we're still here. The chamber struggled to process that. The shadows, those impossible entities, were not just threats. They were necessary. A catalyst. The signal pulsed one final time. And then, something changed. The presence within it shifted. No longer distant. No longer abstract. Closer. Approaching. Fast. Too fast. The core reacted instantly. New anomaly detected, spatial distortion increasing. Source, the arbiter demanded. The answer came with a tone the core had never used before. Not uncertainty. Not confusion. But something dangerously close to alarm. Earth. The chamber darkened as reality itself began to strain. They are not transmitting anymore, the core said. A pause. Then, they are moving. The voice returned, softer now. Almost calm. Get ready. And in that moment, every member of the Galactic Council understood one terrifying truth. This had never been a message. It was a warning. And they were already too late. The first sign wasn't visual. It was absence. Across the Council's monitored space, stars blinked out, not destroyed, not obscured, but skipped. For fractions of a second, entire regions of space simply failed to exist, as if reality itself had missed a beat. Then everything snapped back. Reports, the High Arbiter demanded. The core responded instantly, but its voice lacked its usual precision. Spacetime continuity unstable, multiple sectors experiencing discontinuities, cause unknown. Another flicker. Longer this time. Several council members staggered as their perception desynchronized from reality itself. This is not natural, a strategist said sharply. No, the arbiter replied, focusing outward. It's intentional. The distortions began to converge. All data streams pointed to a single coordinate. A void region. Previously empty. Now impossible. Space didn't bend. It resisted. Like something too large was forcing its way into existence where it did not fit. Energy readings, the archivist asked. Undefined, the core replied, not measurable within known parameters. Then, it happened. No explosion. No flash. No transition. Earth appeared. Exactly where the void had been. Whole, intact, alive. The council froze. Because this wasn't travel. There had been no movement through space. No detectable path. The planet had not arrived. It had been placed. That violates all known, one member began. Yes, the arbiter interrupted quietly. Every sensor locked onto the planet. Oceans churned, atmosphere stable, civilizations active. Unchanged. As if it had always been there. And yet, it hadn't. The core ran simulations at maximum capacity. All failed. There is no model that explains this, it admitted. A silence fell heavier than any before. Because the council wasn't witnessing advanced technology. They were witnessing something beyond their entire framework of understanding. Then, the planet pulsed. Not physically. Conceptually. A ripple spread outward, distorting local spacetime. And from that ripple, ships emerged. Human ships. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They unfolded into existence the same way Earth had. without transition, without motion, simply appearing where they decided to be. The council analyzed them instantly. Primitive construction, inefficient design, materials that should not withstand deep space conditions. And yet, every scan returned the same impossible result. They share the anomaly signature, the core reported. The same as the shadows. That realization sent a shock through the chamber. The humans hadn't just survived the shadows. They had learned from them. A transmission request appeared. No encryption. No delay. Open it, the arbiter ordered. The feed activated. A human stood at the center. Female adult. Her face carried exhaustion, but not weakness. Her eyes were steady, focused. Behind her, dim shapes moved in the shadows of the vessel. Not hidden, not restrained, present, aware. "You've been watching us," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, carrying a weight that didn't belong to a so-called primitive species. The council did not respond immediately, because for the first time, they didn't know how. "We noticed," she continued. A faint flicker of something, almost humor, crossed her expression. "It took you a while." The High Arbiter stepped forward. "What you are doing," it said, "is not possible." She tilted her head slightly. "That's what they said too." Behind her, one of the shadow forms shifted. Not aggressively, just reacting, as if it understood the conversation. "What are those entities?" the Arbiter asked. The question hung in the air. For a moment, the woman didn't answer. Then she glanced back at the darkness behind her. "They're the reason we're here," she said. Not fearfully, not angrily, simply as fact. The council processed that. Failed. Retried. Failed again. "You should not exist here," one member said. She met its gaze directly. "Neither should they." A pause. "And yet here we are." The transmission flickered, not from interference, but from something deeper, like the signal itself was adjusting to the council's perception. "We tried to survive quietly," she continued. Images flashed behind her, wars, disasters, the endless pressure of the shadows. That didn't work. The shadows moved again. Closer this time. Still not attacking. Still not controlled. But aligned. So we adapted. Her voice hardened. Again and again and again. The council felt it then. Not through sensors. Through something deeper. A presence. Massive. Ancient. Watching from beyond the edge of perception. The same presence that had been hinted at within the signal. The source. The origin. Even the shadows seemed smaller compared to it. The woman leaned slightly forward. "Now we understand the game," she said. The Arbiter's focus sharpened. "What game?" She smiled, not with arrogance, but with certainty earned through survival. "We're done being tested." Behind Earth, something moved. Not a ship, not a structure, something vast enough to warp the fabric of reality just by existing near it. Even the shadows reacted. They shifted, tightened, as if preparing. For the first time since their discovery, they showed hesitation. And that terrified the council more than anything else. The woman's voice dropped, quieter now. "But we're not here to destroy you." A ripple of relief started, then died instantly as she finished. "We're here because it's your turn." The transmission cut. The chamber fell into absolute silence. And beyond the newly arrived Earth, that massive presence moved closer. No one in the Galactic Council spoke. For the first time in its existence, silence wasn't authority. It was fear. Outside the chamber, Earth remained suspended in impossible stillness. No orbital drift, no gravitational interaction that matched its mass. It simply held its place in reality, like it had rewritten the rules and forgotten to tell the universe. "Deploy long-range probes," the High Arbiter ordered. No hesitation this time, no debate. The Corps complied. Dozens of probes, some older than entire civilizations, slipped into existence and accelerated toward Earth. They weren't simple machines. They were extensions of the Council itself, capable of observing across dimensions, reading probability layers, mapping causality. If anything could understand what Earth had become, it would be them. The first probe reached the outer boundary of Earth's influence and vanished. No explosion, no distortion, just gone. "Signal loss?" a strategist asked sharply. "No," the Corps replied. "Clarify." A pause. Then, the probe no longer exists within observable reality. Silence deepened. The second probe adjusted its approach, shifting into a higher dimensional scan layer. It lasted slightly longer. Then, gone. The third probe attempted to retreat. It never completed the action. Gone. One by one, the probes disappeared. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Erased. As if Earth's presence rejected their existence entirely. The Council began running deeper analysis. Not on the probes. On humanity itself. "Recompile biological data," the archivist said. The Corps complied. Human physiology appeared in the chamber. Organs, neural pathways, genetic structures. At first glance, nothing unusual. Carbon-based, fragile, inefficient, but then the Corps layered in time-based variation. And everything changed. Human biology wasn't consistent. Genetic drift patterns were far beyond expected ranges. Neural structures adapted in real time under stress. Cognitive pathways rewired themselves at speeds no stable species could sustain. "They are unstable," one scientist whispered. "No," the archivist corrected slowly. "They are adaptive." The Corps zoomed deeper. Microscopic processes revealed something even more disturbing. Human cells responded to threats not just chemically, but informationally, as if they were processing external reality as input and adjusting accordingly. "That's not evolution," a strategist said. "That's iteration." The word hung in the air. Iteration. A process, not a form. They're not a fixed species, the Arbiter realized. They're a system that updates itself. The implication hit instantly. Every war, every disaster, every encounter with the shadows hadn't just been survived. It had been integrated. Each failure became improvement. Each near extinction became refinement. "They don't avoid suffering," the archivist said quietly. "They use it." The chamber dimmed again as new data emerged. Human history, but now viewed differently. Patterns aligned. Moments that once seemed chaotic now revealed structure. Crisis right arrow adaptation, right arrow expansion. Again, and again, and again. "They were being shaped," someone whispered. "Yes," the Arbiter replied. "But not by accident." The shadows appeared in the projection again. Not as enemies, as catalysts. Each encounter forced humanity to grow beyond its limits. To think faster, to act differently, to survive what should have been impossible. And eventually, to understand. "They learned the shadows," the archivist said. "Not just how to survive them." A pause. "But how to use them." Outside, the shadows surrounding Earth shifted. The Council observed carefully this time. They weren't orbiting randomly. They were structured, arranged in patterns that resembled containment. Or cooperation. Or both. "They are no longer acting independently," the Corps confirmed. "They are responding to human presence." A wave of unease spread. Because that meant one thing. Control. Not total. Not absolute. But enough. Enough for humans to survive them. Enough for humans to coexist with them. Enough for humans to learn from them. The Arbiter turned its awareness fully toward Earth. "What have you become?" it asked quietly. No answer came. But something changed. Earth moved. Not through space. Not along any trajectory. It simply became closer. The distance between it and the Council reduced without measurable transition. "Spatial displacement detected," the Core reported. Source: no response. Because there was no source. It wasn't movement. It was decision. Earth was deciding where it existed, and reality was adjusting to accommodate it. The shadows tightened around the planet. Not defensively, but deliberately, as if preparing for something. The massive presence behind Earth stirred again. Closer now. More defined. The Council's instruments struggled to even perceive it. Every attempt resulted in incomplete data, fragments of something too vast to measure. And yet, humanity stood between it and the galaxy. Not as victims, not as survivors, but as something else entirely. The Arbiter finally spoke, voice carrying a weight it had never known before. "If they apply this to us..." No one finished the thought, because they all understood. Humanity didn't conquer in the traditional sense. It didn't dominate. It didn't destroy. It adapted, and anything it encountered eventually became part of that process. Outside the chamber, Earth pulsed again. Closer still. And this time, the Council felt it. Not as a signal, not as data, but as pressure. The same pressure humanity had endured for millennia. Now, it was their turn. The decision to approach Earth was not unanimous. It couldn't be. The Galactic Council had never faced something it couldn't categorize, predict, or control. And now, for the first time, it faced all three at once. Still, avoidance was no longer an option. Earth was already closer. Not moving through space, but redefining its position within it. If the Council did nothing, the distance would reach zero, and no one understood what that would mean. So they chose action. A delegation was formed. Not the most powerful, not the oldest. The most resilient. Species that had survived extreme environments, unstable realities, cognitive strain. Minds less likely to fracture under pressure. Even then, there was no guarantee. "Transmit intent," the High Arbiter ordered. The Core complied. A message simple and direct. "We seek understanding." The response came instantly. Not delayed. Not processed. As if it had been waiting. "Then come closer." The speed of it sent unease through the chamber. "They expected this," the Archivist murmured. "Of course they did," the Arbiter replied. "They adapt faster than we decide." The delegation moved. Their vessel wasn't physical in the traditional sense. It existed across multiple layers of reality simultaneously, allowing it to navigate regions that would tear conventional matter apart. It had never failed. Until now, as it approached Earth's perimeter, everything changed. Sensors desynchronized. Time readings fractured into overlapping streams. Spatial coordinates refused to stabilize. "This region is not consistent," one envoy reported. "It's being actively redefined," another added. The vessel continued anyway, because turning back was no longer an option either. The moment they crossed into orbit, reality shifted. Not violently, not suddenly, but undeniably. The delegation felt it immediately. A pressure, not external, internal, as if something was evaluating them from within their own existence. Then they saw them. The shadows. Up close. Hundreds, no, thousands, surrounding Earth in silent motion. But they weren't chaotic anymore. They moved in patterns. Precise. Controlled. Or at least directed. They're not attacking, one envoy said, almost disbelieving. No, another replied. They're waiting. For what? No one answered. Because the answer was becoming obvious. For permission. A transmission opened. No request. No warning. Just presence. The human woman appeared again. Closer now. Clearer. The exhaustion in her eyes was still there, but beneath it was something else. Certainty. You made it, she said. Not welcoming. Not hostile. Just acknowledging. The lead envoy stepped forward. Its form flickered slightly under the strain of the environment. We come in peace, it said carefully. A faint smile touched her lips. I know. That response unsettled them more than any threat. You're afraid, she continued. The envoys hesitated. Denial felt pointless. Yes, the lead envoy admitted. Good, she said. The word landed heavier than expected. Fear means you're paying attention. Behind her, one of the shadows shifted closer. Not aggressively, but curiously. The envoys felt its presence like a fracture in their perception. What are they? The lead envoy asked, voice tightening. The woman glanced back. For a moment, something almost like respect crossed her expression. Pressure, she said. We've heard that, the envoy replied. It is insufficient as an explanation. She nodded slightly. That's because you've never felt it before. The shadow moved again. Closer. One envoy staggered as its form destabilized, edges blurring as if its existence couldn't hold shape under the strain. Hold position, the lead envoy commanded. The woman watched them carefully. They don't hate you, she said. They don't think like that. Then what do they want? She paused, then answered simply. They test. The shadow turned. Not physically, but perceptually. It focused. On them. The effect was immediate. One envoy collapsed entirely, its structure unraveling into incoherent fragments. Not destroyed, but unable to maintain a defined state. The others recoiled. Weapon systems tried to activate. And failed. Reality refused the command. The woman didn't react. This was normal to her. They're not attacking you, she said calmly. They're seeing what you are. The lead envoy struggled to maintain stability. And if we fail, it demanded. She met its gaze. Then you chain. The answer sent a chill through every remaining member. Because they were already feeling it. Their thoughts weren't as rigid. Their perceptions weren't as fixed. Something was shifting. And you, the envoy asked. What did you do? Her expression hardened slightly. We failed, she said. Again and again and again. The shadows pulsed around Earth. And every time, she took a small step forward. We came back different. The massive presence behind Earth stirred again. Closer now. Watching. The shadows reacted instantly, tightening, aligning, almost bracing. Even they were not beyond its reach. The envoy's voice dropped. What is that? It asked. For the first time. The woman hesitated. Just slightly. Then she answered. The next step. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. Then she looked directly at them. And now, she said quietly. It's yours, delegation returned. Or at least, something that used to be the delegation did. Their vessel reappeared at the edge of the council's chamber, but it didn't arrive cleanly. It flickered, phasing in and out of alignment, as if reality itself was unsure whether to accept it back. Stabilize them, the High Arbiter ordered. The Corps responded, but even it struggled. They are altered. That word echoed. Altered. The envoys emerged. Not damaged. Not destroyed. But changed in ways that defied classification. Their forms were less rigid, less defined. Edges blurred. Structures that had once been perfectly stable now carried a subtle flexibility, as if their existence had learned something new and wasn't finished adapting yet. "What did you encounter?" the Arbiter demanded. The lead envoy stepped forward, or rather, reformed into position. Its voice came slower than before. "We encountered ourselves." Confusion rippled across the chamber. "Clarify." A pause. "Then, they didn't attack us, they exposed us." The chamber stilled. "Explain." The envoy's form shifted slightly, stabilizing as it spoke. "The shadows do not destroy, they apply pressure, they reveal instability." Another envoy, still flickering, added, "And once instability is revealed, it cannot remain unchanged." Silence followed, because that wasn't just observation. That was a mechanism. The Arbiter turned toward the core. "Confirm." The core processed rapidly. Then, data aligns. Human evolution patterns suggest repeated exposure to destabilizing forces followed by adaptive restructuring. "They fail," the archivist whispered, "and become something that doesn't fail the same way again." The lead envoy nodded. "Yes." A deeper realization settled over the chamber. "This is not survival," a strategist said slowly. "This is continuous transformation." Outside, Earth pulsed again. Closer. The distance between it and the Council was no longer measurable in space. It was relational, defined by interaction, not position. "They're not approaching us," the Arbiter said. "They're integrating with us." That word hit harder than any threat. Integration meant change. Irreversible change. A new transmission opened. No request. No hesitation. The human woman appeared again. This time, there was no barrier of distance. It felt like she was standing inside the chamber itself. "You understand now," she said. Not a question. A statement. The Arbiter held its ground. "We understand that you are altering us." A slight nod. "Yes. Without consent." That made her pause. Not defensively. Thoughtfully. "You had the same complaint," she said. "When it happened to you." The words landed like a blow. Because they were true. Humanity had not chosen the shadows. Had not asked to be tested. Had not consented to being reshaped by forces beyond comprehension. And yet, they had endured. Adapted. Become something more. "What happens if we refuse?" the Arbiter asked. The chamber held its breath. This was the question. The last question that still mattered. The woman didn't hesitate. "You already tried that." Confusion spread. "We have not engaged in conflict with you." "You don't have to," she replied. Her gaze swept across the chamber. "You exist, that's enough." A pause. Then she continued, quieter now. "The process doesn't need permission." Silence deepened. Because that meant there was no choice. Not really. Refusal didn't stop change. It only changed how painful it would be. The shadows appeared again. Inside the chamber this time. Not fully. Just present enough to be felt. Every council member reacted instinctively. Forms tightened. Defenses engaged. Structures reinforced. The woman watched carefully. "You're resisting," she said. "That's normal." The shadows shifted. Pressure increased. One member destabilized slightly, edges flickering. Another adapted instantly, restructuring its form to compensate. The process had already begun. "What do you want from us?" the Arbiter demanded. Her expression softened. Not with pity, but with recognition. "The same thing we wanted," she said. A pause. "To survive what comes next." The massive presence beyond Earth moved again. Closer than ever. Now, even the Council could sense it clearly. Not as shape, not as form, but as scale. Something so vast that everything else, shadows, humans, the council itself, felt small in comparison. The shadows reacted immediately. They didn't flee, but they shifted, aligning, preparing. Even they were not beyond this next level. "What is that?" the Arbiter asked, its voice no longer steady. For the first time, the woman didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked toward the presence, then back. "It's what made the shadows," she said quietly. The chamber froze. "And now," she added, "it's paying attention to you." A new signal pulsed through the chamber. Not from Earth, not from the shadows. From it, the presence. Every member of the council felt it instantly. A question, simple, unavoidable. "What are you?" The pressure intensified. Not destructive. Not yet. But testing. Measuring. Waiting. The woman's voice cut through the silence. "You don't have much time," she said. The Arbiter focused inward, then outward, then across the entire chamber. For the first time, it didn't issue a command. It asked, "What do we do?" The woman met its gaze. And this time, she didn't smile. "Same thing we did," she said. The shadows tightened. The presence surged closer. Reality itself began to strain under the weight of what was coming. And the council realized, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far worse. Or far greater. Depending on what they chose next, the question didn't echo. It settled, not as sound, not as language, but as something deeper, something that rooted itself inside every layer of existence within the Galactic Council. "What are you?" It wasn't curiosity. It was evaluation. The kind that didn't accept lies, didn't accept hesitation, didn't accept anything except truth. The chamber trembled, not physically, but structurally, as if the very idea of what the council was had become unstable under the weight of that single question. No one answered, because no one could. For eons, the council had defined itself by knowledge, by control, by mastery over reality. But now, those definitions felt incomplete, outdated, fragile. The presence loomed closer, still without form, still without boundary, and yet impossibly there. The shadows reacted first. They tightened around Earth, no longer drifting, no longer passive. Their movements became precise, aligned, almost defensive. The council saw it clearly now. Even the shadows feared this. That realization shattered the last illusion of hierarchy. Whatever this presence was, it was above everything they had ever known. The High Arbiter stepped forward, not because it had an answer, but because something had to respond. "We are," it began, and stopped. The word "are" felt unstable, undefined, incomplete. The presence didn't react. It simply waited. Pressure increased. Not crushing, not destructive, but undeniable, demanding resolution. The Arbiter tried again. "We are a collective of advanced civilizations. We preserve order, we." The pressure surged, not violently, but decisively, and the Arbiter understood. That wasn't an answer. That was a description. The question wasn't asking what they did. It was asking what they were. Across the chamber, forms began to flicker. Not collapsing, adjusting, reacting. The process had already started. The shadows moved. Closer, not attacking, but amplifying the pressure, as if assisting the presence, as if they were part of the same system. The Arbiter's voice dropped. "We are stable," it tried. The pressure spiked again, sharper this time, and something inside the council cracked. Because stability, was the wrong answer. Across the chamber, one entity shifted. Not in panic, not in fear, but in realization. We are unfinished. The words hung in the air. The pressure paused. Not gone, but attentive. The presence focused. That single statement had changed something. The arbiter felt it, understood it, and for the first time, it let go of certainty. We are not complete, it said. We are not final. We are not beyond change. The chamber reacted. Some members resisted instinctively. Others adapted, their forms loosening, becoming less rigid, less defined. The shadows pulsed. The presence moved closer. Not threatening, observing, testing. Continue, the question seemed to demand. The arbiter hesitated. Then, it made a choice. Not based on logic, not based on data, but on something it had never relied on before. Uncertainty. We are capable of becoming more. The moment the words formed, everything changed. The pressure didn't increase. It shifted from resistance to engagement. The shadows reacted instantly. They expanded outward, no longer constricting, no longer applying force blindly. Now they moved with purpose. Directed, aligned. The presence responded, not with words, but with acceptance. And that acceptance triggered something irreversible. Across the chamber, council members began to change. Not violently, not destructively, but fundamentally. Rigid structures softened. Fixed forms became fluid. Thought patterns expanded, no longer confined to singular frameworks. For the first time, they weren't just observing change. They were experiencing it. The arbiter felt it too. Layers of perception opening, connections forming between ideas that had never interacted before. Emotion, instinct, adaptation, human concepts, integrating, not replacing, expanding. Outside, Earth pulsed again. But this time, it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like alignment. The human woman appeared once more. Not through a transmission, but directly, standing within the chamber as if distance no longer mattered. She looked around, at the shifting forms, at the changing council, at the shadows now moving in harmony instead of opposition. And she nodded. "That's it," she said quietly. The arbiter turned to her. "This is what happened to you." Not a question, a realization. She met its gaze. "Not all at once," she said. "But yes." The presence loomed above everything now. Not distant anymore. Fully engaged. Still beyond comprehension. But no longer unreachable. The question echoed one final time. "What are you becoming?" This time, the council didn't hesitate. The arbiter answered, voice steady despite the transformation unfolding around it. "Something that survives." A pause. Then it added, "Something that adapts." The woman smiled faintly. "Good," she said. The shadows dissolved. Not disappearing. Transforming. Breaking apart into streams of energy that flowed outward, merging with both humanity and the council. The presence shifted. Satisfied. Or perhaps, just continuing. Because this wasn't an end. It was a transition. Reality itself adjusted. Expanding. Rewriting. Not collapsing under the change, but growing to contain it. The council was no longer what it had been. Earth was no longer just a planet. Humanity was no longer alone in its process. And the presence, the force beyond shadows, moved onward, not leaving, not abandoning, but searching for the next question, for the next species, for the next test. And as the newly changed council looked out across a galaxy that suddenly felt far larger than before, one truth settled into every mind, every form, every evolving thought. Earth had not come to join them. It had come to show them how little they truly understood about survival, and how much more they were about to learn. Because out there, beyond the edges of everything they now knew, something even greater was already waiting. And this time, they would not face it as observers, but as participants in a universe that no longer rewarded perfection. Only those willing to change